Katt Williams just cracked open the kind of revelation about Shannon Sharpe that makes celebrity interviews look like warm-up acts before the real circus begins. When Katt started hinting that Shannon's influence stretches way beyond podcast microphones and sports commentary, the internet collectively leaned forward like someone had just dropped classified documents on a kitchen table. He didn't whisper. He didn't soften. He teased a level of power that made people question whether Shannon's smile hid strategy connections, or something so stacked behind the scenes that even Hollywood elites should probably tread lightly. Katt's tone came wrapped in that signature comedic menace, like he was exposing a storyline straight from political thrillers instead of barbershop debates. He hinted that Shannon's access, influence, and voice don't just shake sports rooms, they sway the temperature of entire industries. People replayed clips like detectives scanning footage, swearing they saw confirmation in the way Katt squinted, paused, or smirked. And suddenly, Shannon Sharpe went from sports legend with a podcast to influential power broker, whose reach might be deeper than anyone dared assume. Fans exploded with theories, memes, think pieces, and side-eyes sharp enough to slice through denial. Because if Katt Williams really let the mask slip and Shannon's power is bigger than what's publicly visible, then everything we thought we knew just got rewritten. The moment Katt Williams hinted that Shannon Sharpe's influence stretches far beyond commentary desks and podcast microphones, the internet behaved like someone accidentally leaked the alternate ending to a Marvel film. It wasn't what he said, it was the tone. That sly pause, that smirk, that comedic sparkle that always feels like he's dancing on the edge of a bombshell. Katt basically made it sound like Shannon isn't just respected. He's strategically positioned in rooms where opinions shape markets, headlines, and cultural direction. Fans replayed every second like cryptographers studying national archives, convinced those jokes were carrying deeper sparks. What shook viewers wasn't accusation, it was implication. Katt joked that Shannon speaks and industries listen, like his voice has gravitational pull. The idea that someone who once bulldozed NFL lines and debated sports on screens now quietly directs influence across media, branding, culture, and business made people question whether they've underestimated him for years. Suddenly, Shannon didn't look like a retired athlete with a mic. He looked like a man with leverage, the type whose call gets answered in seconds, whose presence turns meetings serious, and whose partnerships shift relevance like stock prices reacting to headlines. Clips went viral instantly. Fans clipped the word power out of Katt's sentence and blasted it everywhere like it was a code phrase. Some joked that Shannon could get a sneaker brand restructured with a single eyebrow raise. Others claimed his media presence is so strong that companies wait to see how he reacts publicly before taking risks. Katt's playful tone made it feel like Shannon sits on invisible authority, the kind where relationships, credibility, and influence carry more force than contracts. People weren't imagining corruption. They were imagining connections so wide that culture bends around them. The speculation snowballed faster than logic. Suddenly, people were comparing Shannon Sharpe's pull to the type of cultural command Oprah held at her peak, or how Jay-Z whispers and corporate doors mysteriously unlock. Katt didn't accuse anything sinister, he simply ignited curiosity about how far Shannon's respect stretches. Viewers started acting like his influence wasn't just strong, but almost architectural, shaping narratives, elevating talent, spotlighting stories, and steering conversations. A few joked that if Shannon ever wrote a public list of 5 people you should pay attention to, the whole entertainment ecosystem would scramble to get on. Fans pointed out that Shannon's authenticity is part of that aura. He climbed from the field to the media table and built loyalty without gimmicks, scandals, or manufactured drama. His power didn't come from manipulation, it came from credibility. When a man can charm grandmothers, dominate debates, and win the respect of legendary athletes without ever raising his voice beyond conviction, that leaves an impression. Katt framed Shannon as someone who walks into rooms and becomes the gravity source, not because he demands it, but because he's earned it. People also remembered that Shannon's interviews pulled transparency from guests in ways Most hosts can't manage. Athletes, entertainers, comedians, executives, they talk differently when they sit across from him. Raw, unfiltered, honest. Katt joked that this isn't coincidence. It's a reflection of Shannon's hidden asset. People trust him. And trust is the most dangerous and powerful currency in public life. That's the kind of influence that makes viewers wonder how many unseen conversations he's already shaped just by being present. As clips circulated, more theories flew. Some said his voice carries weight with networks because he commands viewers with authenticity and confidence. Others claimed his power is social, not structural, that when Shannon makes a statement, it becomes a pulse check for the culture itself. When an opinion lands heavy enough to spark debates across sports tables, talk shows, and social platforms, that's not casual chatter. That's reach. That's impact. That's the sort of thing Katt was teasing when he suggested there's more beneath the surface than people acknowledged. Then came the think pieces and over-analysis videos. One commentator compared Shannon's cultural role to that of a modern griot, the speaker whose words ripple into the collective understanding. Another called him the unofficial compass of sports commentary, claiming industries monitor his tone for shifts in public sentiment. Some even argued that Katt's comments were less about exposing secrets and more about demanding people pay attention to how much influence Shannon already has. It was praise dressed as mystery, delivered with comedic mischief. The funniest part: none of this required hidden files, scandalous info, or whisper vault revelations. It all stemmed from tone, credibility, and perception. Katt hinted that Shannon's reputation carries so much weight that his presence alone influences reactions. When someone can shape conversations without ever asking to, that's power. And fans treated it like they just discovered a buried map. Did Shannon ever brag about influence? No, but did Katt's playful insinuation make people look at Shannon with new curiosity? Absolutely. Supporters flocked in, claiming Shannon's voice commands respect because he's earned every inch of his place. They listed his discipline, his work ethic, his honesty, and the calm edge he brings to every conversation. Critics couldn't even argue back. Instead, they tried to downplay the idea that one person could wield influence without flexing it publicly. But fans weren't buying the modesty. Katt cracked the door, and people stepped through it expecting a hallway full of deeper meaning. Soon, the narrative twisted again. People weren't just talking about influence, they were arguing that Shannon represents a rare kind of power, the ability to move crowds without trying. In an age where everyone screams for attention, Shannon wins it by simply being himself. And that's what made Katt's hint so explosive. Because influence built on respect, intellect, and authenticity feels louder than any title. Once Katt framed Shannon as someone whose presence matters in boardrooms, locker rooms, entertainment circles, and media agendas. The internet treated the entire conversation like an exposed blueprint of cultural hierarchy. Conversations ignited everywhere. Is Shannon Sharpe one of the few figures who bridges generations, industries, and audiences without ever begging for relevance? Does his opinion quietly sway executives? Do networks weigh his reactions before making moves? Did Katt just reveal what people always suspected, that Shannon's force isn't loud or aggressive, but strategic, respected, and deeply rooted? Those questions spread like wildfire, and nobody needed proof to enjoy the speculation. The story felt too good. In the end, Katt Williams didn't accuse, defame, or fabricate anything dark. He simply placed a spotlight on the possibility that Shannon Sharpe's power has been playing in plain sight this whole time. And once viewers saw that possibility, they couldn't unsee it. The moment became entertainment, mystery, and admiration wrapped together like a scandal with no villain, just curiosity. Shannon Sharpe, the NFL legend turned cultural voice, suddenly looked like someone who carries invisible keys to conversations the public will never get to hear. And thanks to Katt's perfectly timed wink, the world started asking whether Shannon's influence is larger than the image on screen, or whether everyone just realized the size of the shadow behind him. Once Katt's comments reached full circulation, the internet acted like he'd dropped an encrypted prophecy that required decoding. People didn't just nod and move on. They spun theories with the intensity of film critics, dissecting symbolism from award-winning scripts. Suddenly, Shannon Sharpe wasn't just a respected analyst or former athlete. He became the man whose voice allegedly travels through social architecture like a quiet but undeniable frequency. Commentators swore that when Shannon speaks, rooms recalibrate and public tone adjusts whether anyone admits it or not. Meme culture practically exploded. Edits showed Shannon seated behind velvet curtains like a secret council member who determines the direction of media conversations. Twitter threads converted old clips of him speaking into proof that he already understood the weight of his platform. Some users joked that Shannon could influence sneaker stocks by blinking twice, and that if he ever endorsed a cereal brand, the entire breakfast industry would panic. It wasn't malicious, it was admiration dressed in satire. Humor used to cope with the suspicion that Shannon might wield influence people underestimated for years. Katt's playful commentary became the spark that turned discussions into digital roundtables. Podcasts and commentators dropped entire segments breaking down the idea that Shannon sits at a crossroads of respect, relatability, experience, and insight. They highlighted how entertainers, athletes, and executives openly embrace his presence, not because they need validation, but because his voice aligns with integrity. His directness isn't abrasive, it's trustworthy. His humor isn't defensive, it's disarming. His authority doesn't demand attention, it earns it. And that's the sort of influence that makes audiences gasp when someone, like Katt, points out the obvious power. Doesn't always wear a crown. That revelation spread so far that people started reviewing Shannon's interviews like historical artifacts. They paid attention to how guests opened up, how topics unfolded, how emotions surfaced naturally instead of being dragged out. The takeaway was unanimous. Shannon receives authenticity because he gives authenticity. People feel safe being vulnerable in the space he creates. And vulnerability is priceless currency in a culture obsessed with image. That kind of power doesn't need force, it just needs presence. Katt's implication that Shannon occupies that space shook people, who realized they'd been watching this dynamic for years without naming it. Then the internet went even deeper, pulling out the magnifying glass on his career transition. They traced how Shannon went from NFL icon to cultural voice so effortlessly that the shift looked strategic. They theorized that his influence isn't coincidence, it's the result of credibility forged in discipline, perspective, emotional intelligence, and resilience. A man who earned respect in a brutal sport suddenly became someone whose perspective influences public interpretation. The narrative viewed Shannon as someone who didn't pivot careers. He expanded platforms. And that realization made Katt's commentary feel less like a joke, more like exposure. People began recognizing that Shannon speaks with the kind of honesty that celebrities usually fear. He calls out hypocrisy without pettiness, questions narratives without theatrics, and critiques behavior without self-righteousness. Those traits are rare, and in the digital era, they're magnetic. Critics who tried to dismiss Katt's comments ended up accidentally reinforcing them. They admitted that Shannon's takes travel far, shape barbershop debates, push radio hosts to retract statements, and inspire viral soundbites that echo into comment sections for days. When a person sets tone that repeatedly, fans begin to wonder if that tone quietly guides entire discourse cycles. Entertainers chimed in with layered reactions. Some nodded knowingly, while others laughed it off as Katt stirring the pot with exaggerated creativity. But beneath the humor, many admitted that Shannon's presence brings weight. The man doesn't just speak, he influences how people listen. His laughter can diffuse tension in interviews. His disappointments can reshape how viewers perceive misconduct. His approval can validate talent that hasn't yet been universally recognized. That's what Katt meant when he spoke about power, not money, not politics, not secret files. But reputation so strong that it subtly sculpts outcomes, internet investigators started connecting dots between Nightscanner's platform and the ripple effect it creates. They noted guest choices, topics, and the reactions that followed. One viral thread argued that Shannon's discussions humanize athletes more than traditional sports segments do, changing how the public interprets them. Another insisted that Shannon challenges narratives that favor popularity over fairness, forcing audiences to think before they join bandwagons. These weren't accusations, they were compliments framed as conspiracy, because excellence always looks suspicious in a world addicted to chaos. Some fans even joked that Shannon might be one of the last public figures who can tell the truth without turning it into spectacle. He doesn't inflate drama for clicks or weaponize controversy for personal gain. Instead, he balances humor, humility, and backbone with surgical precision. Katt simply pointed at that duality and exaggerated it as legend. Internet lore loves a subtle king, especially one who acts like his only agenda is honesty. Shannon's style suggests that power isn't hiding. It's just so natural that people forget to name it. Critics tried to downplay the theory by calling it comedic storytelling, but their attempts fell flat once fans began listing example after example of Shannon's cultural ripple effects. They remembered the conversations he sparked, the corrections he prompted, the opinions he reframed, and the countless clips that went viral because he verbalized what others only whispered. Katt didn't need to provide documentation. The internet realized the evidence was public all along. The exposure wasn't about hidden secrets, but rediscovery of influence sitting in plain sight. And once people collectively recognized this, the tone shifted from shock to fascination. Instead of asking, "Is this true?" they began asking, "How far does it go?" They wondered who listens privately, whose minds change silently, and how many conversations behind closed doors mirror the candor Shannon displays on camera. That curiosity built a kind of myth around him. Not sinister or mystical, but respectful and intrigued. The mystery wasn't a question of morality, but reach. How wide, how deep, how invisible, how profound. By the mid-heat of the speculation wave, the scandal energy transformed into cultural celebration camouflaged as theory. Instead of exposing a flaw, Katt seemed to expose a strength. Fans noticed how effortlessly Shannon connects with grandmothers, younger athletes, comedians, business figures, and executives. They saw how many age groups trust him, how many industries invite him to comment, and how many viewers bookmark his perspective as reference when forming their own. If influence is defined by the ability to shift dialogue, then Shannon's reach isn't speculation. It's legacy.comment sections. It's eventually turned into praise cycles disguised as conspiracies. People said Shannon's voice has a protective quality, one that advocates fairness when headlines weaponize assumptions. Others said his rawness is refreshing in an era trained to hide vulnerability. The idea that Shannon holds invisible sway in culture, discourse, and perception no longer felt exaggerated. It felt reasonable. Katt pulled the thread the internet unraveled, the tapestry, and what they found. Underneath was respect structured like authority. And that's how the viral theory stopped being comedic side-eye and became something far more fascinating. Not a scandal, not an expose, but a realization that Shannon's power might simply be the quiet influence that comes from intelligence, authenticity, and earned gravitas. People didn't fear it, they admired it. They turned Katt's playful tease into a campaign of recognition, framing Shannon as a cultural compass whose direction holds value. By the time the smoke cleared from the speculation wave, one thing was undeniable. Katt's comments didn't damage Shannon's reputation, they amplified it. And the more people reviewed his interviews, reactions, and insights, the more the theory solidified. Because sometimes the loudest kind of power is the one that looks quiet from a distance, until someone finally points out how loud it really is. As the conversation matured past memes and pure detective-style theory boards, the narrative transformed into something almost reverent. People weren't looking at Shannon Sharpe as a man who might have secret influence. They were looking at him as someone whose presence simply bends the air around him. They dissected the ripple effect of his honesty, the weight of his empathy, and the precision of his scrutiny, convinced that Katt Williams hadn't exposed anything hidden. He just peeled the metaphorical label off a truth that was always visible. Shannon's reputation alone has gravitational pull. Even the skeptics admitted that whether you agree with his takes or not, Shannon speaks from a place that feels grounded rather than rehearsed. That's a rarity in media spaces where people often perform values instead of living them. Once that realization landed, Katt's commentary began circulating as philosophy rather than scandal. People framed it as a reminder that influence doesn't have to shout. It can operate through credibility so sturdy that it guides thought without demanding compliance. Shannon didn't need to prove his power. His track record had already done it. Then came the aftermath shifts. Fans suddenly started quoting his lines in conversation, using his points as reference anchors when arguing about sports ethics, entertainment controversies, or public behavior. His name became shorthand for balanced critique. When he voiced disappointment, people didn't laugh it off. They paused and reflected. When he praised someone, viewers automatically listened closer to whoever earned that praise. Internet culture rarely gives anyone that kind of respect. And the realization that Shannon has it without ever asking became the very essence of the power. Katt dramatized. Old interviews went viral all over again. Views went viral all over again. Clips were stitched together, showing moments when guests exposed insecurities they never revealed elsewhere. Other edits highlighted how Shannon managed to challenge a narrative respectfully while still holding it accountable. Fans began calling him the unofficial conscience of modern sports discourse, someone whose voice hits with enough sincerity that even disagreement becomes learning instead of tension. If power is influence built through integrity, then the joke became the confirmation. The funniest twist in all of this was how nobody needed conspiracy, drama, or accusation to believe it. The narrative grew stronger the more viewers looked at Shannon's impact. It wasn't about shadow networks or coded connections. It was about the way audiences naturally respond to authenticity when they recognize it. People used to underestimate the influence of intellect wrapped in relatability. Now they wondered how they missed the signs, the way athletes straighten their posture when he speaks, the way celebrities lower defensiveness in his presence, and the way audiences nod harder when he articulates their feelings better than they can themselves. Supporters said Katt's playful hint was actually a cultural compliment in disguise, signaled that Shannon's voice might be serving as a stabilizer in a world saturated with noise. They praised the way he blends emotional intelligence with candor, how his vulnerability disarms ego, and how his humor keeps the space safe for honesty. Influence like that doesn't need shock value, doesn't need headlines. It doesn't rely on controversy. It just exists, woven into the way people engage with his perspective. This realization sparked new discussions about how certain figures become reference points without trying. Some insisted Shannon's power comes from his ability to see humanity before headlines. Others argued that it's the credibility built through discipline and life experience that grants his words weight. A few said it's all of it at once, a combination that makes his commentary feel like the grounded voice in a room full of loud microphones. When someone has that kind of presence, people don't follow blindly. They consider, reflect, and reevaluate. And that subtle shift is a form of power more impactful than volume. Even his critics admitted they pay attention to what Shannon says. They may disagree, but they listen closely. And in online culture, attention is the highest currency. When Katt describes Shannon's real power, fans interpreted it as a reminder that influence isn't measured by titles, companies, or positions. It's measured by how many people recalibrate their perspective when you speak. Shannon didn't manipulate that energy. He earned it through transparency, vulnerability, and scrutiny that feels rooted in moral clarity instead of performance. long after the initial viral wave faded. People continued quoting that moment, not because it exposed scandal, but because it revealed a dynamic they hadn't recognized clearly before. Shannon Sharpe wasn't hiding power. He was quietly displaying it every time he asked the questions others wouldn't, challenged narratives others ignored, or defended people who needed fairness instead of caricature. The real power fans discussed wasn't hidden control, it was earned authority, projected through wisdom and authenticity. The commentators even admitted that his presence in media reshaped expectations. Viewers now crave honesty delivered, without theatrics, critique without cruelty, and nuance without confusion. They said Shannon embodies that cultural shift. Katt's nudge unlocked the conversation the public didn't know it needed, acknowledging that some individuals influence discourse simply because they carry integrity that audiences trust. Trust is the rarest form of power, especially in a world where skepticism reigns. As the dust finally settled, the story took its final form. No scandal, no bombshell, no conspiracy. Just curiosity inflamed by relief. Relief that influence can still be built on respect instead of antics. People stopped asking what Shannon controls and started appreciating what he represents: stability, intelligence, accountability, humor, empathy, and most of all, the kind of sincerity that reaches across age, race, and industry without force. The realization that this was the truth behind Katt's commentary, not exposure. But recognition turned the original tease into a cultural salute. Fans weren't stunned because they thought Shannon had secret influence. They were stunned because they suddenly noticed how obvious it always was. They just needed someone unapologetic enough to speak it out loud. And Katt did what Katt does best: mix humor with insight until speculation turns into revelation. By that point, Shannon Sharpe's power had become internet legend, not as myth, but as acknowledgement. A reminder that some figures don't need scandal to command attention. They don't need shock value to shape culture. They don't even need spotlight obsession. They just need authenticity strong enough to echo. And whether you agreed, disagreed, laughed, theorized, or shrugged, nobody walked away from this moment without asking one question: how many other powerful voices are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to point out what we've already been witnessing? Because once the public finally sees the influence in front of them, it never disappears again. And Katt Williams didn't expose a secret, he spotlighted a truth the world overlooked. Shannon Sharpe's real power isn't rumor, it's resonance, it's respect. It's the way people listen when he speaks, and that kind of influence doesn't need to be leaked. And if you're still here after that deep dive, give yourself credit. You've just navigated a viral moment that proved influence doesn't need smoke or scandal to feel legendary. Katt Williams didn't blow open a vault or expose dirty secrets. He simply said out loud what the internet hadn't fully processed yet. Shannon Sharpe carries a voice built on honesty, respect, and cultural resonance. And once that truth got spoken with Katt's sarcastic swagger, fans reacted like someone dropped a bright spotlight on something they'd been staring at for years without naming. Now it's your turn to jump into the debate. Do you think Shannon's power comes from his credibility, his emotional intelligence, the loyalty he built across audiences, or the way he handles conversations with precision instead of ego? Did Katt just exaggerate the obvious? Or did he nudge the world into recognizing something we'd all subconsciously clocked? Drop your take below, because your angle becomes part of the narrative too, and the comments are where the best theories always explode. And while you're stirring that conversation, absolutely fold that like button in half like you caught it lying. Punch subscribe like you're signing an oath. And hit notifications like you don't want to miss the next cultural moment that flips the timeline.